I hadn't been to Jasmine's house in over a month. She always had an excuse, too busy, too tired, too many meetings. But tonight she called and said dinner was at 7 and that I should come hungry. I shaved, ironed my best shirt, and even brought a bottle of that overpriced Pinot she liked. The street was lined with manicured hedges and glowing porch lights, the kind of neighborhood where everyone has a Peloton and opinions about kombucha. Her front door opened before I could knock. Jasmine stood there, phone in hand, her mouth tight and eyes flicking to something over my shoulder like I was a delivery she hadn't ordered. "Dad," she said flatly. "Come in. Shoes off, please. We just had the floors cleaned." Inside smelled like eucalyptus and garlic bread, an odd combination, but fitting. The kitchen looked like a magazine spread. Marble countertops, hanging copper pans, open shelving with carefully placed cookbooks no one had ever opened. I followed the scent of dinner into the dining room. Jasmine's husband, Trent, stood behind a bottle of bourbon, grinning like he owned the air in the room. "Martin, look at you, sharp as ever. Sit down, man. Pour yourself something." He clapped my back like we were old college buddies. Jasmine didn't look up from her phone. She sat at the end of the table, scrolling with her thumb, glass of wine untouched. I sat, letting the silence settle. She didn't ask about my knee, didn't mention the card I mailed last week, didn't even say if she was glad I came. Trent kept pouring, talking about how dinner was from some new meal kit, Service Organic, sustainably sourced, cooked in under 20 minutes. Jasmine finally looked up and said, "Hope you're hungry. We figured you wouldn't mind something quick and healthy." Her voice had an edge I didn't recognize. Not rude, just hollow. I smiled anyway, the way fathers do when they're grateful to be remembered at all. As we began to eat, I tried to find my daughter behind her silence, but she didn't meet my eyes once, and that was when I realized something was off, something had shifted, and I was no longer sure I'd been invited out of love. Trent spoke with the confidence of a man who'd never had to worry about money. "The crypto portfolio's bouncing back," he said between bites of rosemary chicken. "And with that new property in Tahoe, we're probably looking at 7-figure equity by Q3. He said it like he was reading off a weather report. Jasmine nodded along absently, sipping her wine now, her posture loose but distant. I'd never cared much for Trent's business jargon. Too many buzzwords, not enough substance, but I let him talk, watching Jasmine. She dressed nice, tonnet hair styled, makeup neat, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. When she finally spoke, it was mid-sentence, interrupting Trent's monologue about leveraging vacation rental tax advantages. "Well, Dad's paying for it anyway," she said, casual as a shrug. I blinked. "Paying for what?" She didn't look up. "The down payment, the new house. We told the broker you'd cover it. Your name's already on the pre-approval." I set my fork down carefully, the sound louder than I meant. "I didn't agree to that." Trent chuckled like I'd made a dad joke. "Come on, Martin, it's not a big deal, it's just a cosign. Your credit's solid and we'll handle the payments. It's win-win." Jasmine finally looked at me, and her expression was flat, no warmth, no guilt. "It's just easier this way, Dad. I mean, you're not doing anything with your money." My chest tightened. I glanced around the room, the designer chairs, the imported rug, the 400 candle flickering beside a tray of untouched charcuterie. I remembered the cashier job she'd had at 19, the night she called crying because her card was declined at the gas station. I'd driven 20 miles to fill her tank and left her a $50 bill for emergencies. Now, at 34, she sat across from me as if my worth began and ended with my bank balance. "I see," I said quietly. Trent raised his glass. "2 family investments, huh?" I didn't lift mine. I stared at Jasmine, looking for a trace of the girl who used to fall asleep on my chest watching Pixar movies. But all I saw was someone who'd learned how to smile through taking. The wine sat untouched. So did my appetite. I still remember the day the nurse pulled the curtain around Maria's bed and gently said, "You might want to say goodbye now." Jasmine was 9. She was in the waiting room with a coloring book and a juice box, too young to understand what was ending while I stood holding my wife's hand, begging her not to let go. After the funeral, Jasmine curled up in our bed every night for a month. She didn't cry, not in front of me. She just stared at the ceiling and whispered, "When's Mommy coming back?" I didn't know how to answer her, so instead, I learned how to braid her hair, how to cook pancakes that weren't burnt, and how to pack school lunches with little notes inside. I stopped being just a father. I had to become everything. I took the morning shift at the high school and tutored on the side in the evenings. I clipped coupons, bought secondhand, and skipped meals when the budget didn't stretch far enough. On Saturdays, we'd go to the library together, then the park. I told her stories about her mom, about how she laughed too loud at movies and always stole French fries when she thought I wasn't looking. When Jasmine got older, I never missed a recital or a parent-teacher conference, even when I was exhausted, even when I had to grade 60 term papers by midnight, because that's what Maria would have done. That's what a parent does when love isn't something you say, it's something you show. It wasn't always easy, but I never let her see me crack. I gave her everything I had, and some things I didn't. You don't count the money when you're helping your kid. You just pay the bill, smile, and tell yourself it's love in action. But lately, the math had started to ache. Her first car? $600. $200 cash from my savings. Jasmine didn't like the used Honda Civic, said it was too boxy, so I paid extra for the upgraded model. I still remember how she squealed when she saw it in the driveway, keys in hand. She said, "You're the best, Dad," and hugged me so hard I forgot how tired I was. Then came college UCLA because she didn't want to go somewhere boring. I drained the education fund Maria and I had started. When that wasn't enough, I took out a Parent Plus loan. I didn't tell Jasmine I skipped my own dental work that year. After graduation, she bounced around jobs marketing assistant, then yoga instructor, then working on a lifestyle brand. Between gigs, I covered her rent. Every single time. She never asked twice. Sometimes she didn't ask at all, just assumed. When Trent proposed, she wanted a small but elegant wedding. Elegant ended up costing $28,000. I offered $10,000. She cried, said I was ruining the happiest day of her life. I took out a personal loan to cover the difference. Then the house, the one I walked through with her, nodding while she gushed about open floor plans and quartz countertops. I co-signed because her credit was shaky. I was told it was just temporary. 5 years later, my name's still on the deed. My money's still going into a house where I'm no longer welcome for holidays. And somehow, I'm still footing the bill for a life I'm not invited to live in. She doesn't see me anymore, just the account number I became. It started with lentils. Jasmine was talking about a new clean eating program she and Trent had joined, something subscription-based, expensive, and unreasonably proud of using Himalayan salt. I mentioned gently that they might want to consider cutting back a bit. Inflation was hitting hard. Even my fixed pension felt tighter lately. Jasmine rolled her eyes. "Dad, not everything's about penny pinching." "I'm just saying," I replied, careful not to sound like I was lecturing. "Maybe try cooking more at home. Beans and rice go a long way. Your mom and I—" "Oh my God," she interrupted, setting her wine glass down harder than she meant to. "Do we really have to bring up the Great Depression every time someone wants to enjoy their life?" I blinked. Trent chuckled awkwardly, clearly unsure of where the line was. "You're living beyond your means," I said. "The Tahoe property, the meal kits, that new car lease? I'm not judging, Jasmine, I'm just worried. If something happens—" "Nothing is going to happen," she snapped. "You don't get it, Dad. You've never gotten it." "I've gotten everything for you," I said more quietly than I intended. "Every raise, every overtime shift, every gray hair. You've always just been a wallet to me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You want a thank you card for doing what parents are supposed to do? You didn't give me options, Dad. You gave me guilt with receipts." The room went quiet. Even Trent stopped pretending to stir his drink. Jasmine stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore, or worse, like she did, and resented what she saw. The silence between us stretched so long I could hear the slow tick of the quartz kitchen clock. Finally, I stood up. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. She'd already said everything. The roads were nearly empty. Just the hum of streetlights, the distant flicker of taillights, and my own breathing tight, shallow, unfamiliar. You've always just been a wallet to me." The words didn't echo, they carved, over and over, like her voice was still in the car, sitting beside me, slicing deeper every mile. It had taken me 34 years to raise her, 10 seconds for her to unravel it all. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other gripping my thigh, the way I used to do during parent-teacher meetings when her grades were slipping and I didn't want to seem too worried. But this wasn't about grades. This was about value. Mine. To her, I wasn't a man. I was a debit card with a heartbeat. The red light at Del Mar and 4th felt unusually long. I stared straight ahead at nothing, not trusting myself to look in the rearview mirror. I was afraid I'd see something I couldn't take back, like the moment my daughter stopped seeing me as her father. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered, as it always did. I didn't fix it. Not tonight. Inside, I hung my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the couch without turning on the lights. The house was cold, quiet, the kind of quiet that made your ears ring. I looked at the old photo on the wall, Maria holding baby Jasmine, both laughing under the summer sun. I used to think that picture held joy. Tonight, it just looked like a mistake I couldn't undo. And in that moment I knew, something in me had changed. Forever. The safe wasn't hidden. It sat plain as day behind my bedroom closet door, right where it had been since Maria convinced me we needed one, in case anything ever happens. Back then, we used it for passports and old photos. Now, it held the paper trail of a life spent giving. I turned the combination, slow and deliberate, as if I were unlocking something far heavier than metal. Inside, everything was where I left Ida. Of course it was. I hadn't touched these files in over a year. A small box labeled wedding sat in the back, next to the fireproof folder that held my will. I pulled both out and laid them across the bed like evidence in a trial. The wedding invoices were neatly stacked and rubber-banded together. Florist, 3, 100. Catering, 7, 800. Venue deposit, 4, 500. DJ, photographer, dress alterations, valet parking. Jasmine had wanted a live harpist during the ceremony, set the tone. That alone was 200. I told her we could afford 10-0. She cried, said her dream was slipping away, said I was being selfish. So, I made it happen. $30,000, give or take. I never told her how many side jobs I took that year, tutoring, grading AP tests, subbing in classrooms during my lunch breaks, all so she could have her day. I opened the will next. The old draft, dated 3 years ago, still had Jasmine listed as the sole beneficiary. The house, the pension, the life insurance policy I never bothered to cancel after Maria passed, all of it. I stared at my own handwriting in the margins. For Jasmine, she'll be okay if she has this. But I hadn't written that after a betrayal. I'd written it out of love, out of trust. And now? Now, I wasn't sure she deserved so much as the pen I used to sign it. I hadn't been to the cemetery in months. Not because I didn't care, God knows I cared, but because talking to a headstone always made me feel like I was lying to myself, like maybe if I just stayed away, I could pretend Maria wasn't really gone. That she was just out of town maybe, still somewhere. But today, I needed her. The grass was damp from last night's rain, and someone, probably the groundskeeper, had trimmed the rose bush beside her plaque. I bent down and brushed away the leaves clinging to the marble. Her name stared up at me. Still too quiet, still too clean. "I'm sorry I haven't been here," I said, settling onto the bench. I thought maybe staying away would make it hurt less. The wind rustled the trees, soft and aimless. I leaned forward, elbows on knees. She said I was just a wallet, Maria, just a wallet. 34 years of raising her, and that's what I am to her. I laughed once, bitterly. I found the wedding receipts, the will. You were right, you know. You always said I gave too much without asking for anything back. I stared at her name until it blurred. I thought if I gave her everything, she'd become someone strong, grateful, kind. The words caught in my throat. But I think I raised someone who only learned how to take. Silence again. Only the soft whir of a bird flapping overhead and the buzz of traffic in the far distance. Did I do this, Maria? Did I break her by loving her too much? No answer. Just the ache in my chest and the taste of regret on my tongue. I miss you, I whispered, not just because you're gone, but because you would have known what to do. You always did. I sat a while longer, long enough for the sun to peek out from behind the clouds. Then I stood, brushed off my pants, and looked down one last time. I think I need to do something, Maria. Something you wouldn't have liked, but maybe you'd understand. And with that, I left her resting place and the last piece of who I used to be behind. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I'd stopped by Jasmine's house on a Sunday afternoon. She'd left her purse in my car after our last dinner, and I thought dropping it off in person might smooth over the tension still hanging between us. I parked on the curb and walked up to the porch, the sun warm on my neck. Her car was in the driveway. The front door cracked open just an inch. I heard her before I even knocked. "He literally doesn't say no," Jasmine was saying, her voice casual and amused. "Like ever, I swear. I could ask him to co-sign for a jet ski and he'd just smile and say, 'Is that what you really want?'" Laughter. "Another voice your friend," I assumed. "Must be nice having an emotional ATM," the friend said. I froze. Jasmine replied, giggling, "Yeah, well, he's got no one else. No mom, no siblings, no real friends. He just exists and pays. I mean, I love him, but let's be real, he'd give me his house keys if I cried hard enough." Another burst of laughter. This time it sounded distant, foul. My hand tightened on the purse strap until the leather creaked. I backed away slowly, like a burglar leaving a crime scene, but the crime wasn't mine. I didn't knock. I didn't drop off the purse. I walked back to my truck and sat there, the engine off, staring at the steering wheel as if it might tell me what to do. She said I had no one else. She wasn't wrong, but that didn't make her right. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table long after the lights went out. The fridge hummed in the background, and somewhere a floorboard creaked like it was trying to remind me this house was still alive, even if I barely felt that way. At 12:42 a.m., I stood up and walked to my desk in the corner. The top drawer held everything: bank statements, loan documents, the deed to the house, Jasmine's car note, the old ledger Maria used to balance the checkbook with those neat little numbers in blue pen. I laid it all out like I was preparing for surgery. 5 years of auto payments to her mortgage, 2 emergency transfers when Trent lost a client, a credit card still in my name that she maxed out buying furniture for the guest room I'm no longer invited to stay in. I opened my laptop and began logging into accounts. Every one. I unchecked her name from shared access, revoked authorizations, set cancellation requests in motion. One by one, the digital ties began to fall away. It felt like pulling weeds deep, old roots that had wrapped around the foundation of my life. And God, it hurt. But with each document sorted, each number reviewed, each click confirming I was no longer financing my own disrespect, something else rose in me. Clarity. Resolve. Not anger. That would fade. No, this was something colder, sharper. It was the moment a man realizes he doesn't need to be needed, especially by someone who only loves him for what he gives. By 2:15 a.m., the table was clear. By 2:30, so was I. She was right about one thing. I didn't have anyone else. But that meant I had nothing left to lose. And everything to reclaim. Banks always smell the same: paper, carpet cleaner, and something faintly metallic. I used to take Jasmine with me when she was little. She'd sit on my lap while I signed deposit slips, swinging her legs and asking why everyone talked so quietly. That memory hit me like a freight train the moment I stepped inside. "Good morning, sir," the woman behind the counter said. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'd like to speak to someone about updating access on my accounts," I replied, calm, polite, like I wasn't about to erase my daughter from my financial life. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a younger man in a pinstripe tie who introduced himself as Ethan and offered me coffee. I declined. "I'd like to remove a co-user from all joint accounts," I said, sliding my ID and account numbers across the desk. Ethan tapped on his keyboard. "Of course, Mr. Reyes. And the person's name?" "Jasmine Reyes, my daughter." His fingers paused, just briefly. I didn't explain. I didn't owe him one. Within 20 minutes, her name was removed from my savings account. The investment portfolio Maria and I had started in '91, the credit line she used just for emergencies, and the checking account I used to auto-pay her mortgage. Ethan printed confirmation receipts and slid them across to me in a neat stack. "One more thing," I said. "Close the secondary card ending in 7,750. 2. She's the only one who uses it." He nodded and clicked again. "Done." I left with a manila envelope of clean slates. Outside, the sun hit me hard brighter than I remembered. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking around carrying someone else's debt. For the first time in years, the money in my name actually felt like it belonged to me. It was almost therapeutic. I stood in front of my door with the new lock set in one hand and a Phillips head in the other. The old deadbolt came off easily, too easily, I thought, considering how many people had held copies of that key over the years. Jasmine, Trent, a cleaning lady they hired once without asking. Anyone, really. Not anymore. The new lock clicked into place with a satisfying final twist. Brushed nickel, sturdy, mine. Inside, I walked straight to the kitchen drawer where Jasmine kept her emergency card, the one I'd given her after the wedding, back when I thought we were still a family. I opened my scissors and snipped it in two. It cracked like dry wood. The halves went into the trash without ceremony. Next was the safe. I'd never changed the manual override key, hadn't thought to. I kept the original tucked in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. I retrieved it, dropped it into a new hiding spot only I knew about, and updated the digital passcode from her birth date to mine. It felt good. More than that, it felt necessary. When you spend decades giving, you forget what it feels like to guard. Tonight, I would sleep behind a door only I could open. My money was protected. My memories were locked away. My peace finally was mine to keep. And Jasmine? She was about to learn that even the most generous fathers can run out of reasons to give. The last time I'd sat across from Harold Klein, my hands had trembled the whole meeting. Maria had just passed, and I was reeling numb, scattered, afraid of forgetting something important. But not today. "Martin," Harold said with a surprised smile, standing to shake my hand. "Haven't seen you in years. How've you been holding up?" I returned the handshake, firm. "I've made some decisions." We sat. He adjusted his glasses, opened his leather-bound notepad, and gave me that patient, practiced look lawyers are trained to wear. "I want to update my will," I said. "Completely." He nodded. "You want to change your executor?" "No," I said. "I want to remove my daughter, Jasmine. Entirely." His pen paused. "You're sure?" "As sure as I was when I first wrote her in," I said. "But the girl I raised? She's not the woman standing in her place." Harold nodded slowly, no judgment in his face, just professional understanding. We spent the next hour going through the documents. I named my niece, Claudia, retired Navy, honest to a fault, as the new executor. I designated a portion of my estate to a local literacy nonprofit Maria used to volunteer for. The rest? Set aside for scholarships, small grants, and the Senior Center's after-school mentorship program. None of it would go to Jasmine. When we finished, Harold slid the new draft across the desk. "One signature," he said, "right here." I signed it. Just like that, I erased 34 years of entitlement with a single stroke of a pen. She didn't knock. She just walked in like it was still her house, still her world, and I was just an old man who hadn't caught on yet. "Dad?" Jasmine called from the hallway. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floors, fast and purposeful. "Are you home?" I stood in the kitchen drying a mug with a dish towel. "Door was locked for a reason," I said calmly. She appeared in the doorway like a storm front, cheeks flushed, eyes sharp. "Why was my card declined?" I folded the towel slowly. Because it's no longer your card. Her mouth opened, then closed. She laughed bitterly. Is this about what I said at dinner? Are you really being that dramatic? I stepped forward, setting the mug on the counter. This is about everything you've said, and everything you've taken, and everything you've assumed. I'm your daughter, she said, like that word was a golden key. I know, I replied, and that used to mean something. There was silence. She looked around the house like it had betrayed her too. Okay, she said finally. So what now? You're cutting me off? No, I said. I'm cutting myself free. Her mouth twisted. Unbelievable. Jasmine, I said, voice even, you showed me exactly who you are. I just finally believed you. She stared at me, waiting for me to fold, to apologize, to flinch. I didn't. She turned and left without saying goodbye. And for once, the sound of the door closing behind her felt like peace, not absence. It took exactly 36 hours. That's how long it took for Jasmine to go from stunned silence to a full-blown meltdown. She showed up again, this time pounding on the door with the urgency of a fire drill. I opened it, slowly, carefully, letting her see that the locks were still changed, the threshold still mine. Dad, what is going on? She demanded. You're acting insane. I talked to the bank and they confirmed everything. You took me off the accounts? You canceled the transfers? I didn't answer right away. I stepped aside, not to let her in but to let the question settle. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't about fear. It was about control slipping through her fingers. I didn't take you off anything, I said. You were never entitled to any of it. She blinked hard, trying to reset the moment like it was some glitch in her reality. You're upset. I get it. You're going through something. You'll cool off. I just looked at her. She crossed her arms. You've always cooled off. After Mom died, when I failed out of that first college semester, when Trent lost his job, you always came around. This time, I said gently, I came around to the truth. She stared at me like I was a stranger. You're making a huge mistake, she said, voice rising. What are you even going to do with your money? Die with it? I didn't flinch. No, I'm going to live with it. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Just a glare, and then the sharp stomp of her heels down the walkway. As the engine of her car roared to life, I watched from the porch, still, calm, because I knew she wasn't finished yet. The guilt campaign started 2 days later. First, it was a text. Hey Dad, just wondering if you're okay. I've been worried. You've never done anything like this before. I didn't respond. Then came the voicemail from Aunt Lydia. Martin, sweetheart, Jasmine called me crying. She's devastated. She says she doesn't understand what she did wrong. You two need to talk this through. Don't let pride break your bond. Pride. I'd swallowed mine for decades. What Jasmine was feeling wasn't heartbreak. It was withdrawal. Next, I started getting the social media pings mutual friends I hadn't spoken to in years tagging me in photos, posting inspirational quotes about forgiveness. One even sent me a message. Hey man, Jasmine says you're going through something. If you need to talk, I'm here. Don't push away the people who love you. Love didn't look like invoices, or assumptions, or entitlement dressed up as affection. Then came the boldest play, Trent himself calling me man to man. Look, Martin, I don't know what she said, but she's hurting, and I know it's not easy getting older feeling isolated, but you don't have to burn every bridge just to prove a point. I hung up without a word. That night, I made tea and sat on my back porch under the stars, rereading a letter Maria had written me on our 20th anniversary. In it, she'd called me a man who carries the world for others and forgets he's allowed to set it down. So I left my phone on silent and let the world scream. You don't notice the erosion at first. It starts small and extra, 200, to cover a late credit card bill, a missed thank you here or there. Then it becomes normal, expected, part of the rhythm. I used to think Jasmine was just struggling to find her way. After Maria passed, she was angry and adrift. I let a lot of things slide, tantrums, debts, that sharp tone in her voice she'd never used when her mother was alive. But I told myself she'd grow out of it. I thought if I stayed soft, stayed dependable, she'd come back to center. that someday she'd look up and realize how lucky she was. Instead, I trained her to see love as a line of credit. No interest, no limits. I said yes to things I should have said no to. I co-signed on dreams that weren't mine. I kept covering rent, tuition, car repairs, new furniture, not because I believed she couldn't do it alone, but because she never believed she had to. And every time she asked and I gave, a little more of my backbone dissolved. I enabled her. Not out of weakness, but out of love, the wrong kind of love. The kind that keeps giving long after it's stopped being appreciated. And now, for the first time in years, I was finally saying no. Not to her, to the version of myself that had forgotten I was allowed to. It took me 3 tries to dial the number. Alex hadn't called in almost 6 years. We'd traded cards on birthdays and holidays, but conversations were distant, hesitant. Ever since he moved to Seattle, we'd lived more like polite acquaintances than family. But the silence had never been mutual. He'd pulled away, and I knew why. When he picked up, his voice was cautious. "Dad?" I cleared my throat. "Hey, son, I hope it's not too late." A pause. "No, it's okay, just surprised. You okay?" "I think so," I said. "Better than I've been in a long time." Another pause. Then, more gently, "You sound different." I told him everything. Not the sanitized version, the real one. The fights, the money, Jasmine's words. Her reaction when I finally stopped funding her fantasy. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. "I always wondered why you let her treat you like that," Alex said softly. "When I was younger, I thought you just didn't see it. Then I realized, maybe you did, and you thought you could fix it." I swallowed hard. "I thought I had to choose between you both, and I figured you were strong enough to walk away." "I was," he said, "but it still hurt." Silence settled between us again, but this time, it was warm, restorative. "I'd like to come visit," he said after a while. "Been too long." "You'd be welcome anytime," I said, voice catching. "Even Jasmine? Free?" he teased. "Especially Jasmine free." We laughed. And for the first time in years, I felt like a father again, not a wallet, not a workhorse. Just a man reconnecting with someone who never wanted my money, only my time. The senior center was only 5 blocks from my house. I'd driven past it for years without ever noticing the colorful sign or the little community garden by the parking lot. I went the first time out of curiosity. I kept going because for the first time in months I felt like someone, not something. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls. There was laughter in the hallways and arguments over crossword clues, and no one cared what car you drove or who co-signed your mortgage. I met Joe, a retired firefighter with a bum knee and a wicked sense of humor. Carol taught watercolor classes and insisted I had a surprisingly gentle brushstroke. She was also quick to call out my terrible posture. Henry ran a chess club on Thursdays and took great pleasure in beating me mercilessly until I won my first match, and he insisted it was luck. I wasn't anyone's father there. I wasn't a burden, a bank account, or a guilt trip waiting to be exploited. I was just Martin. I started bringing cookies some afternoons, even got roped into helping install new shelves in the reading room. It reminded me of who I used to be before my hands only knew how to write checks in silence. Simple things, light things. For the first time in years, I laughed without regret. And I wasn't alone. The account used to be called Jasmine's Emergency Fund. I'd set it up after her second layoff quietly, without telling her. Just in case the car broke down, or rent got tight, or Trent forgot to pay the power bill again. I'd added to it regularly. Every month, 5 years untouched. Almost $20,000 just sitting there. She never said thank you. She didn't know it existed. Or maybe she did and just assumed it would always be there when she needed it. I stared at the online banking screen for a long time before I clicked Rename Account. The Maria Reyes Memorial Education Fund. She would have loved that. Maria spent 2 decades as a teacher's aide at the elementary school down the street. She always brought extra snacks for the kids who didn't have lunches and bought books with her own money for classroom shelves. She believed in second chances, in community, in potential that didn't always fit inside a GPA. So I set up a meeting with the community center coordinator. Told her I wanted to start something small, grants, maybe, or help with GED programs. Scholarships for single parents trying to finish night school. By the end of the week, it was official. Jasmine's safety net had become someone else's lifeline. And just like that, my money finally meant something again. Not for privilege, not for status, but for purpose. For people who knew what a gift really was. The first decline transaction happened on a Tuesday. Jasmine was at some boutique spa lavender towels, gold-dipped facial treatments, the kind of place where the water costs $12 and you're expected to call it hydration therapy. The card didn't go through. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Her text came in at 3:17 p.m. sharp. "Dad, something's wrong with the visa. Fix it. I'm at checkout." No greeting, no punctuation, just an order, like I was the help desk for her lifestyle. I didn't reply. At 3:22, she followed up with, "What's going on? Did you forget to pay something?" By 3:30, she'd tried the backup card, the one I'd canceled last month. Declined again. Panic sets in fast for people who've never had to check a balance before they swipe. At 4:12, the third text came. "Are you mad? Is this about the house? Let's talk." But I wasn't mad anymore. I was done. She pulled up like a storm, tires squealing, door slamming, heels clicking so hard on the walkway it sounded like gunfire. I opened the front door before she could pound on it, not to welcome her, just to keep the neighbors from hearing what I already knew was coming. Her face was red, jaw tight. "You canceled everything," she spat. "Are you out of your mind?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside and let her see that nothing inside had changed except me. She walked in without being invited, her anger filling the room like smoke. "The cards, the account, the automatic transfers. You took me off everything." "Yes," I said. Her eyes went wide. "You can't just, Dad. I'm your daughter." "That's not a license," I replied. "It's a relationship, one that's supposed to go both ways." "You've never said no to me," she hissed. "Not once in my entire life." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." She laughed loud, bitter. "So what, now you're cutting me off? Because I said something during a fight? Because I was upset?" "No," I said, calm as steel. "Because you meant it." She froze. "I heard what you said on the phone, Jasmine. To your friend. About me having no one. About how I'd always keep paying because I had nothing else." Her mouth opened slightly. "You were eavesdropping?" "I was returning your purse." That shut her up. "I built a life for you," I said. "Brick by brick. Paid for your education, your wedding, your mortgage. I gave until it stopped feeling like love and started feeling like debt." She looked down, for once unsure of herself. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "And that's what finally made it clear. You see me as a resource, not a father. You don't visit. You don't call unless you need something. But somehow, I was still trying to earn your approval." Her lip trembled. "I'm not angry, Jasmine. I'm just finished. I still love you. I probably always will. But I don't owe you anything anymore." Silence. She turned without another word and walked out. This time, I didn't watch her go. This time, I closed the door and felt something unfamiliar rush in to take her place. Freedom. She came back the next day. Different tone, different tactics. This time, she wore sadness like a costumized red, makeup smudged just enough to signal she wanted sympathy but not surrender. "Dad," she whispered as I opened the door. "Please, can we just talk? I miss you." I said nothing, stepped aside, again. She took it as a yes, sat down on the couch, folded her hands in her lap like a scolded child. "I didn't mean what I said," she began. "It was a bad night. Trent and I were stressed. I was venting. I never should have said those things." She looked up, watery eyes, trembling lip. I waited. "I've been dealing with anxiety," she added. Money stuff, marriage stuff. You've always been my anchor, and when you pulled back, I panicked. You didn't panic, I said gently. You lost control. Her expression shifted just for a second. The sobs softened into something sharper, but then she leaned into the tears again. I just need a little help, she whispered. We're behind on the Tahoe place, and Trent's got some new investors lined up. If you could just... She trailed off when she saw I wasn't blinking, wasn't flinching, wasn't budging. You said I was just a wallet, I reminded her. You laughed about it, and when the money stopped, you didn't call to ask if I was okay. You called to demand I fix it. She sniffed, louder this time. You're being cruel. No, I said. I've just stopped apologizing for protecting myself. She stood up abruptly. You'll regret this, you know. I'm your only child. I looked her in the eyes. No, Jasmine, you were my daughter. I raised her. I loved her. I lost her somewhere between the spa days and the shopping carts. She stormed out without another word, and I let her go without chasing a ghost. The Facebook post went up 2 days later. Black and white photo of us from 10 years ago and Jasmine at her college graduation, both smiling like we had a future. Caption: heartbroken to say my father has decided I'm not worth loving unless I can pay my way. Cut off, discarded, forgotten. What kind of parent does that to their own child? The likes came in quickly. So did the sympathy comments. I'm so sorry, Joss Ollie. He sounds toxic. Some people just don't get it. Parents like that don't deserve you. Then came the shift. People started asking questions. Mutual friends, old co-workers, even her former roommate. Didn't he pay for your wedding? Didn't he co-sign your house and car? You've lived off him for how long? Someone screenshotted her post and added, You called your dad a wallet. Now you're mad the wallet closed. The tide turned fast. Comments dried up. A few even unfriended her publicly. She deleted the post by the next morning. But the damage wasn't mine. It was her own reflection finally held up in full view of the world. And me? I didn't say a word. Because silence was the only truth she never learned how to spin. The envelope came by courier. No return address. No greeting. Just a 3-page letter from a law office I'd never heard of, signed by someone with a name that sounded more expensive than competent. Jasmine was threatening to sue me. The claims were vague: undue financial manipulation, emotional abandonment, and unlawful revocation of financial obligations. I almost laughed, But all I did was shake my head and set it on the kitchen counter. The next morning, I walked into Harold Klein's office with the letter in hand. He read it once, then again more slowly the second time. Baseless, he said plainly. You owe her nothing. There's no contract, no agreement, and certainly no obligation. I figured, I said, but I want to respond clearly. He nodded and pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's send a cease and desist, not just for the threats, for the public defamation, the harassment, the messages she's still sending you. An hour later, it was done. Official, bound, delivered. Jasmine would receive it in 2 days. I imagined her opening it, sitting in her kitchen probably with a glass of wine, probably still convinced I'd fold, that I'd come crawling back with apologies and another check. But instead, she'd get a letter. And this time, the paper would carry more weight than any dollar I'd ever given her. That night, I opened the box I hadn't touched in over a decade. It sat on the top shelf of the bedroom closet, behind an old winter coat that still smelled faintly of cinnamon and lavender Maria's scent. Inside were the letters she'd written me over the years, anniversary cards, birthday notes, little folded-up pieces of yellow legal paper from the days when she'd leave reminders tucked in my lunch. One was dated a week before her last hospital visit. I unfolded it with care. Her handwriting had been shaky but still hirslooped, graceful, patient. If something ever happens to me, please remember, loving someone doesn't mean letting them drain you. You're allowed to say no, even to people you'd give your life for, especially them. Keep your heart open, but protect the parts of you that can't be replaced. I read that line twice. Then again, she always knew how to say what I couldn't. I sat in silence for a long time, the letter resting gently on my lap like a hand I could almost still feel. I'd spent years confusing sacrifice with survival. I thought loving Jasmine meant enduring her. But Maria had seen it coming, and in that moment I finally understood. Boundaries weren't rejection. They were protection, of love, of dignity, of self. I carefully folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and returned it to the shelf. Then I turned off the light and slept with a peace I hadn't known in years. Because I was no longer trying to earn love. I was finally learning how to keep mine. The folding chairs squeaked as people settled into them. The community center's multi-purpose room had been transformed for the day balloons, a podium, a projection screen with an old photo of Maria smiling in front of a classroom. I stood near the back, my hands folded in front of me, unnoticed and at ease. I didn't need attention. Today wasn't about me. The director stepped up to the mic and tapped it twice. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here as we honor a woman who gave her life to making others feel seen and capable. Maria Reyes." A light applause. Some people knew her, others only knew of her. But the feeling in the room was the same, sincere. "And today," the director continued, "we award the very first recipient of the Maria Reyes Education Funda, single mother of two, studying to become a special education teacher." The woman stood up slowly from the front row, hand trembling over her chest, eyes already glistening. She walked up and took the check, the certificate, and the microphone. "I never thought I'd finish school," she said, voice cracking. "I almost gave up, but this changes everything. Thank you." She looked directly at me, even though no one had said who funded the grant. She knew. I nodded once. She nodded back. Afterward, a few people thanked me. I shook hands, took photos, smiled. But when I walked out into the sunlight and felt the breeze on my face, it wasn't pride I felt. It was Maria. I could almost hear her voice. "Now that's how you spend your money." The knock at the door was soft, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. When I opened it, Alex stood there with his wife Lena and their daughter tucked behind his leg, clutching a stuffed bear. She peeked out at me with eyes too big for her face. "Hi, Dad," he said. I blinked. "You came." "You said anytime," he replied. "We figured now was a good time." I stepped back, holding the door open. Lena gave me a quick hug as she passed, and Alex scooped his daughter up in one arm as they walked in. The living room felt warmer almost immediately. We sat around the table drinking lemonade, talking about nothing urgent, how the flight was, how preschool was going, how their new apartment still smelled like fresh paint. Then Alex looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." "I am," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I am." There was a silence, not awkward, but full of understanding. Later, I brought out a box of old photos. We passed them around, laughing at my terrible mustache in the 90s and Maria's impossibly big hair. Even the little one joined in, sitting on my lap and poking at each face with sticky fingers. When the sun dipped low and cast golden light across the floor, I felt something settle inside me. Not just peace. Belonging. Not the kind I bought. The kind I'd earned by finally letting go of what hurt and making room for what healed. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a father in name. I was a father again. It arrived without a return address. Just my name, written in a handwriting I knew by heart-sharp dramatic loops, always more style than substance. Inside was a folded sheet of thick, stationery, scented faintly like that expensive perfume Jasmine used to wear when she wanted something. I read it once. No apology, no insight, just anger sharpened into sentences. "I don't know who you've become, but you're not the father I remember. You're cold now, cruel. You embarrassed me, betrayed me. After everything I've been through, you cut me off when I needed you most." There was no mention of what she'd said, what she'd done, what I had carried for her for 34 years. "You'll regret this when you're older and alone." She ended with a warning masked as a farewell. I folded the letter carefully, walked out to the fire pit in the backyard, struck a match, and watched it burn. The paper curled, the ink turned to smoke, and the scent of perfume turned acrid in the flame. I didn't feel anger. I felt release. Because closure doesn't always come wrapped in remorse. Sometimes, it arrives when you stop waiting for it and choose peace instead. Spring came early that year. I bought a sapling from the nursery in oak, strong and steady. The kind that lives long enough to outlast bitterness and bloom long after memory fades. I planted it in the far corner of the backyard, where the sun hit just right and the soil ran deep. I marked the spot with a small stone, for Maria, for growth. As I knelt beside the roots, pressing the earth gently into place, I spoke softly. "Every branch will be something we built," I said, "and every leaf will be a part of what comes next, not what we lost." The wind stirred. I swear I felt her in it. Not watching, not judging, just near. I stood and looked at the tree, not much taller than a broomstick now, but I could already picture it stretching skyward, casting shade across the yard. A place where children might one day play, where stories might be told under its limbs. This was my legacy now. Not a name on a will, not a checkbook emptied in silence, but roots in the ground, a home filled with love, not expectation, and a life that belonged, finally and fully, to me. I stepped back, brushed dirt from my hands, and smiled, because I was no longer holding on to what was broken. I was building something that could grow. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.